Hi, everyone. Welcome to this episode of Transformed You. We're going to get into some good stuff, I think, today.
I think so, too.
As we're talking about the subject of fear and turning your fear into your greatest victories. And that's really something that has been a theme in our life and our journey. It started a revolution in my life, and everything changed when I began to take a different approach in the subject of fear, which blankets into a lot of areas. Because if you're new to my teaching or new to the stuff that we talk about in this area, fear has an umbrella, and it hits a lot of areas: the anxiety, the worry, the stress. And many people don't realize, first of all, fear is involved in those areas. But what I'd like to do is I'd like to provide for you, because everybody has aspects of fear in their life that they need to face, they need to work through. We either avoid them, shove them down, never deal with them, or we obsess about them.
Justify.
Or somewhere in the between of all that, right? Or we justify them. Yeah, totally. So what I'd like to get into, and we'll kind of see where the conversation meanders, and I pray that you get a lot out of it, is what your fear says about you. What the fears that you face say about what's going on inside. Instead of just either avoiding your fears, justifying them, like, no, this is a good fear, I got to have this fear, or we do a lot of stuff like that. Stop and pause and go, wait a second, what's going on here that I can discover? And there are a number of things that we could look at, but I want to park in 1 John chapter 4 for a second, because John had an amazing revelation of the love of God. And if you're one of those people that's like, I'm really trying to understand God's love, I encourage people often to go into 1 John. It's, first of all, it's very brief, it's very action applicable, it's practical.
Action applicable.
Yeah, I just made that up. And it's but it gets into understanding love in a very powerful way, especially when it comes to emotional health, mental health, relational health, and receiving love from God. 1 John 4:17 says, well, let's go back a step. In verse 16, it says, we have known and believed the love that God has for us. That's really important, because the first thing I would say in every area of fear, of what your fear says about you, first and foremost, at the top of the list, is if you identify the fear, you're identifying a place where love needs to have a deeper work. Receiving that love, because it's the love of God that is the remedy to our fear issues.
Right, which we find out.
So he says, we've known and we believed the love that God has for us. This is not a head thing. For most people reading this, they'd say, yeah, God loves me.
Well, let's stop there for a second and just talk, because I think just that whole premise, most people, like you're saying, would say, yeah. It's the experience that we're wanting to move people towards.
Right.
Of what it means to actually feel that, sense that.
Right.
Really understand that. We know it up here.
It's an experience of the heart where you don't just rattle off a theory, you possess it.
Right.
It's something that is in you. So he says, we know and believe. I think it's the NIV that says, we know and we rely on the love that God has for us. That's interesting, because when tough times come, what do you rely on?
Right. Do
you rely on, he loves me not? You go through hard times, or an attack comes, or something you're battling, and we go into this, God, why? What we fall into all these different panic reactions. We accuse God, we question him, and the apostle says we rely on that love. It becomes our anchor. It becomes a thing that we hold on to. So he says we've known and we believe the love that God has for us. God is love. And if you've heard me teach on this subject, I say he doesn't just have love. He is love. He is the very essence of love. So in looking at your fears, you need to develop a greater radar to how I can be perfected in the love of God, especially in that area. Do we have some examples that we could talk through?
Well, I think that there are people who say, well, I don't know anybody that's loving. I've never really understood love in my life. But if you've even interacted with someone who's, I think, kind or generous or Those are aspects of love. And so I think we have to look at things that we wouldn't necessarily take in as forms of love and go, wait a second. Because I think that's been a big part of this journey, for me anyway, is recognizing, oh, that's a loving thing. Because I'm so used to the opposite and not really having a true, like, oh yeah, I know love. I relate to that kind of love. My love has been like, occluded with some weird lenses of things, which I think most people would say that's probably true for their life.
When I was beginning to understand how to battle anxiety, for example, one of the things I realized was, okay, this anxiety is signaling to me I need to dive deeper in what it means to be loved, because love is the answer. It's the antidote here. I had to open myself to the relational experiences of love around me, of like, okay, everyday interactions that I have, I need to open my heart to going, God will use those things.
Right.
Everything from somebody at church or somebody I bump into, even just talking to an elderly woman at CVS.
The grocery store or something. Right, that's what I'm saying, like interactions really, with those things.
Who's really kind and taking that in. Here's a big one. Going through the drive-thru, ordering something, and somebody just has a really kind exchange with you, Those are meaningful to you. Yeah. Yeah, because so many people are just, they're stuck in their stuff or whatever.
Right.
But take a moment and go, that was a great interaction. I received that in my heart. Don't just fly by.
So let me ask you this. Why don't you think we value those things more? Do you think it's because of what I just said, that we can't recognize it because we don't really have a true marker of understanding loving interactions? Yeah. Or is it, all the above of we're just so busy or we're just like, we push that kind of stuff away? Like, what do you think it is that we're not really stopping and pausing?
Well, I think that
and recognizing that, you know what I'm saying?
You said it in, going back to the original thesis of this discussion is, what are your fears saying about you? It's saying you buzz by in life and don't take time to pause, because things of the heart take time, take slowing down, take recognizing. And when you live from the heart, you learn to appreciate the things that are very easy to just buzz on by. So I had to start, I started going for walks and appreciating nature and thanking God for that and connecting to his love in those moments. Now, if you're a kind of a busy go kind of person, like, I don't have time for that. No, you can't afford not to do that, because your anxiety or your stress levels are like dashboard signals. They're revealing to you a deeper work that needs to happen. So I think, to answer your question, it reveals to us that we don't have time. And that was one of my big things I would say. I don't have time. I don't have time. And it was like, that's a problem. That's a problem that my go-to line is, I don't have time. I'm so busy. We should examine the sin, so to speak, of unnecessary busyness.
Yeah.
Well, that we wear as
avoidance.
Right.
It is avoidance. But
because love takes time to slow down, to pay attention to things. And God, the invisible God, reveals himself through visible relationships.
Right.
Right. Like, stop and think about it for a second. You wouldn't even know Jesus if a human being didn't tell you about him.
Right.
You wouldn't know God unless someone told you. So if you think about it, your references of God began with human interactions. So there's two things. One, there's blessings in that, but then there's also stuff you got to work out. There's stuff you got to heal from because they were inaccurate representations of his nature.
Right.
And we all carry those. So in the healing process, God uses people. And we would go, well, yeah, but the people around me, or this person is that. Okay, you may have to have some distance from that person. You may have to have some boundaries with this person, but don't just put the fortress up and block yourself off. Because you'll need to keep the membrane of your heart open for people that he could use to be vessels of references for what love means, because love is the answer. So
Right.
he says, he who abides in love abides in God and God in him. So if you want to connect to God, you need to connect to love. And how do you learn to connect to love? Well, by learning to receive the love that God has for you, saying yes to it, relying on it, letting it connect to your heart, but exercising it in your relational grid. Learning to receive love that other people send your way that maybe you just overlook, or maybe you push back, or maybe you go, you find these false humility ways of rejecting it, or genuinely pouring of your heart to others and letting God work in that exchange, right? Love has been perfected among us in this. This is how you know love is having a work. And this, if you don't get anything out of this broadcast, I pray it's this. The way that love has had its work, that we may have boldness in the day of judgment. That's really interesting, right? Because when you think of judgment, what's the first thing most people think of?
Right. Scared to death. Which is our reference. I mean, we can unpack that one big time here, because really, we've talked about this a lot. Your first representation of who God is through your parents. So how you view judgment, discipline, all of those things come down to how your parents interacted with you and where you did something wrong, you needed to be talked to, you needed to be corrected. So this is like mind-blowing when you think about you're so perfected in love that when you even stand before judgment, you're like, okay.
Right.
Okay.
You're going to have boldness. And so, okay, here's another thing for those of you that are like note takers.
We could go so far with this. This is good.
What your fear reveals is you, in that area, you may have a judgment-based relationship with God.
Right.
A condemnation-based relationship with God. Most of my Christian life growing up was me going, God, I got to fix these areas so I can stand before you. We use terms like get right with God and things like that. Great terminologies, but had a twisted application in how we felt we stood before God, how we felt we stood righteous or not righteous or anything like that. And love is the key here, because it's going to build relationship connection with God, so that even, and you could go into a lot of different ways where this passage could lead you, of judgment even being present, and you're not afraid. That's amazing. So, because as he is, so are we in this world. So the work that God does in even when judgment comes upon the earth, we carry his nature and we don't have to be afraid because we're his loved children. That's amazing. So in that context, he says, there is no fear in love. Mm-hmm. That true love and fear cannot coexist. Now, you may have a mixture where you're learning love, but there's fears, right? And we're all in that process where we're learning what love means, but he's really bringing clarity that where there is love, true love, and its perfect power, fear can't come in. It's the antidote. Because what does love create? It creates safety. And where you fear is an area where you don't feel safe.
Right.
Right? So he says, perfect love casts out fear. The language there is the same terminology of casting out an evil spirit. It has the power to literally displace, take fear, and kick it out. So wherever you have a fear issue is where love needs to have a deeper work. So for example, if you've got all these stress and fears about your finances, that fear identifies an area that God is seeking to cultivate and develop, a love and safety that he's your provider. And he'll walk with you through this, and you can find direction, what you need to walk through it and overcome. That's just one example.
But if I could go a little bit deeper before you tell your story, getting to that place, I think, is recognizing too, like, it goes back to the premise of your parents being the original example of who God is.
They create the compass.
You did not have anyone have your back. It was you. Too bad. So sad. You're on your own. We ain't going to save you. Whatever steps you take, too bad. You're going to have to suffer the consequences. And a lot of us need to, I think, visit I don't want to say the rhetoric, but the sentiment that our parents spoke to us over those things, and now how we are transposing them on God.
Yeah,
he is not going to help me. He's not even going to give me wisdom. He's not going to do any of those things.
Right. And our family of origin we talk about the rejection mindset, which comes out of our upbringings, which then God is far. He leaves me hanging. And those things usually
silent, right?
Yeah, those things are usually based on our experiences of how your earthly father or how your earthly mother reacted to you in certain circumstances. It leaves you an imprint so that when you go to God, it's very common that if you feel God's leaving you hanging, there were times growing up you felt like in family they left you hanging, and it's an invitation for God to heal that.
So you were going to tell a story. I remember when. Do you remember now? or did I make you forget?
I'll get to that in a second. Okay. I think when you have a fear issue of any kind, it also is a window to your history.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Absolutely.
Because most of our fears we tend to justify. Otherwise, if we were like, if there was no attachment to it at all, it would be at times easier to dismiss. Not always, but so there is an internal thing that goes on in our memory banks and our emotions of like, no, I got to pay attention to this because, and now it goes to our story. So, one of the fears that I had debilitating was public speaking, like awful, very obsessive fear. And I've mentioned this in stories and broadcasts before. And it had a real foundation of the fear was basing itself on, if you blow this, you are a failure and you will be publicly humiliated and you're going to be nothing.
Like, I think a lot of people can relate to that. Yeah.
That's what it's based on.
Yeah.
So what is the invitation there? What's the fear actually saying about me? Is I need to learn who I am as a loved child of God, that there is no pressure in God. I mean, the list goes on, that this does not weigh upon my destiny. If you ever feel in the moment like I gotta really step up to the plate in this moment, I disagree. That's a pressure filled. The pressure's on you, and then you steal the enjoyment, you steal the fun of it. So I had to see speaking in front of crowds as my invitation to grow, to stretch, to mature, to experience God's love. Because that's where we talk about the head to the heart. I had to go through it over and over and over again, wrestle through. Sometimes I needed to just warfare and take my stance. Other times I needed to just take in God's love and kind of walk in with like, not nonchalant, but more of a like, yeah, there's the weight of the world is not weighing on this.
Right. To get it 100% right and perfect.
There are other times it was, I'm not going to take myself seriously. I'm just going to have fun. Before I get up, I'm going to laugh and have fun in conversation and know God's going to take care of it. Mm-hmm. Right.
That's not saying though that you weren't prepared.
Right.
Because it's twofold of you being ready with your words in preparation, not to the point of, obsession, but then going, I'm resting in what I know and God's going to help me with this.
Right. Because there is an element to fear's attack that says you're not prepared.
Right.
And there is some factual evidence to that.
Right.
The reality is,
because usually those things hit truth.
Right.
I'm saying
aspects of truth.
Aspects of truth.
Yep.
Yeah.
And the enemy is an accuser. And the stuff he hits you with, he's got evidence.
Right.
Now God's not accusing you. He's like, hey, we're gonna learn in all your weaknesses, struggles, sins, everything. We're gonna go on a journey together. But the enemy is an accuser. And so he'll hit you where you are most vulnerable and where you feel the least equipped and prepared. God leads you into all kinds of things that you don't feel prepared for. To do what? Give him glory of his work in your life. That's when we talk about the true strength of God. Like, am I in my strength or in God's strength? The true strength of God appears in those moments where you don't feel like you have it together, but you just learn to rest, trust, believe, rely on the love that God has for you. So let me finish this part of this verse. Perfect love casts out fear because fear involves torment. So I write in my book, I Will Not Fear. The thought of fear is a terrorist.
Right.
And what does it do? It just seeks to intimidate you. It seeks to use thoughts and impressions and dread and projections to just box you in. But there's another thing here. In other translations, because fear involves punishment. And most people have a punishment, I shouldn't say most, many Christians have a punishment-based relationship with God. So no wonder you're vulnerable to fear.
Right.
Because you're like, if I screw this up, it's going to pull the brick out of the wall and the wall's going to come tumbling down. It's going to be like Jenga. I pull this thing and make the wrong move. The whole thing.
I think that you just saying that, pulling the wrong piece out and making the wrong move, I think most people I know from my own journey, that was a big fear of mine, making wrong decisions. So because I was afraid of making wrong decisions, I didn't make any. And then what I did, they were last minute decisions if I had to make them, and they weren't what I wanted anyways. And then Oprah messed me up. Oprah messed me up when she's like, you got to go with that feeling. That aha, I had an aha. The gut, you got to go with it. It messed me up. I think it messed a lot of people up.
Yeah.
I really do. Because then we have that leaning anyway to go, well, how am I feeling about this?
Follow the peace.
That's what I'll just do is I'll follow the peace, or I'll follow where it looks like God's opening the door. And really,
you just mentioned like 3 Christian cliches in one sentence. follow the peace, the gut, the open door, all these things that what we're really saying, because I like to challenge some of the statements that we say, because it's like, what's really underneath that? And I challenge that, and I will not fear. I challenge the gut thing because we follow it as though it's the Holy Spirit every time. But think about it. Most of your fears, like anxiety, they affect your cardiovascular system. You feel it up here. And where else do you feel it? Down here, right? Right in your gut. We have all these like GI issues and stuff like that on top of it, right? So you feeling that there, and what are you looking for? The peace. You could be, I'm not saying always, you could be looking for the path of least resistance.
Yeah.
And not what's really, because many times the thing God's leading you right into is the thing that makes you afraid. And your gut don't feel great.
Right.
But you're like, and it takes discernment, it takes wisdom. So I don't want to create a blanket statement that people apply to everything. But I'm just saying, I had to check the gut because I followed it. And then I realized, wow, over and over again, fear was the dominant narrative of my gut.
Right.
So I'm sorry to
No, because you're saying that, a lot of people follow that like, well, that doesn't feel good and that's fearful, so I'm not going to do that. I had a history of, did that make me feel good? Is that going to make me feel good? I want to feel good. I want to like that. I want, which probably is a lot of addiction stuff in my family trickling down, of escapism.
Sure.
Of let's feel better
which
about
then,
all this.
Which then doesn't condition you to look for the
face
right
things.
thing and the best thing, but to look for the thing that, and isn't that what we're doing? We're constantly looking to avoid the pain, discomfort, move to comfortability, and God's going, hey, come out of the boat. So even in when we teach on the safety of love, don't confuse that with like 100% comfort and certainty. God will not lead you into 100% comfortability and certainty. You actually need a lot of uncertainty because that's where you adventure, you stretch, your faith grows, where you learn to trust. So that whole area of uncertainty, see that as a place of like developing new muscles. But we have to go back to what you're saying. What's our compass? What's our gauge and discernment of how we make decisions?
Yeah. And I would say too, and I would like to just talk about this for a second. Your thoughts, because we have talked about this before, but there are a lot of people, Christian speakers, who tell these amazing stories of where everything just lined up. And they are amazing stories. And I'm like, we've often said, we've never had, like, you get confirmation usually like later down the road, or you may get something that helps you confirm. But there's parts of it sometimes where I feel like we've done a disservice in where we've shared stories, because I do think a lot of people, a lot of Christians, we come from broken histories. We come from broken backgrounds of a lot of uncertainty, a lot of just very unhealthy love in our life. So when it comes to relating God and trusting him, we have a lot of brokenness in that area. Then we hear these speakers speak these things of like, I mean, I knew this decision was coming in this door and this door and this door and this door and everything, boom, boom, boom. And you start to then question, okay, well then it hits these other things of the rejection, insecurity, which then builds upon the fear. Oh, I must not be good enough. If God did that for them and laid it out in perfect order, something must be wrong with me and my own journey.
Yep. Very true. Then we create equations that are not the best equations for maturity, because we'll say,
right. And growth.
we'll say everything that God is in will just work out
right.
perfectly. And I've actually found that where God leads you, there's a lot of rough stops and hitches and glitches and speed bumps and areas, you break down on the side of the road kind of stuff. And so in those moments we equate, well, God can't be in this.
Right.
So it's like, wait a second. If you see the fear inflaming, I'm just posing a question. You actually might be right on to where you need to be. So many times we want to alleviate the fear. And it's like, wait a second. There's a new job opportunity, or there's a new step, or you're in transition. There's a new season you're moving into. The old references of comfort are rising up. I want to go back to comfort. Didn't you see that in the Bible where the children of Israel constantly, God works miraculously, and the next day they're like doubting and questioning and accusing God, right? And then they want to go back.
Right.
Like, we want to go back to that horrific lifestyle, but it's what we knew. And that's whenever you step forward, remember what your fear says about you is you're at a place of decision of, will I move into new territory that's unfamiliar, or will I just go back to what's comfortable? Because God is in the business of stretching you.
Yeah.
And when you sense that fear rising up, it's sometimes good to ask, is this a place where I'm learning to develop my boldness based on, not boldness in like, I think I can. Boldness based on, he loves me and he's got my back. And I'm going to learn his love in this season where fear is coming at me with a hatchet.
And so the ultimate in maturity and self-awareness is, okay, if I have these fears going on, what are some things I need to look at to grow in? Listen, it's not easy sometimes.
No.
It's not. And sometimes we can maybe even make it sound amazing,
Because love, because learning love is not something you can just put in 3 bullets. It takes investment, slowing down, tuning in your heart, dealing with brokenness. It takes opening up your heart to things. It takes, okay, instead of like, oh, I got to do my devotions, you just stop and go, okay, God, I need to start getting more honest with you. I need to slow down my heart, receive from you. I need to learn to come into alignment in the stillness of the moment. I need to, just the word stillness. I gotta learn what stillness is.
Right. And I think we need to start looking at the themes. What are the themes and the things that keep coming up in your life that you can really get with God, get with your spouse, get with someone close to you and say, I have these themes going on. And start asking that directed question. All right, within this battle, how can I get more perfected in love to start working this out with God and start getting more settled in this issue, because then that grows you to the next level and opens up for more things. And that's what we all want. If you want growth, if you're even listening to us, that's why you're here. That's what you want. And it does take the work. And it takes that self-awareness to say, this theme of I have fears about making decisions on this. I have a fear of letting my guard down with my spouse. I have a fear of should I move on? All these things are calling out and giving the invitation for God to work in your life in a greater way and really let you understand and learn his love.
He who fears has not been made perfect in love. So not made perfect in performance, not made perfect in trying to do everything right. We've done so much, and well, you got to do this, you got to do that. Change. We're very behavior focused, so that leaves us symptomatically chasing things and not getting to the root and the heart of it. The heart of the matter is love needs to have a deeper work. And then he explains, because everyone will say, well, how? How?
Right.
How do I receive God's love?
Well, give him the 10 points. No, sorry.
We love him
Right.
because he first loved
us.
us. He gives you the heart recipe. You've got to learn to receive. He loved you first.
Right.
So quit trying all this stuff and learn to come into alignment with your thoughts of, what does this mean that he loves me? What does it mean for my bills today that he loves me so much? What does it mean for this thing at work or this thing I'm going through with my kids, that my God in heaven, who is a father, loves me perfectly? What does that mean for this interaction I got to have today, or these troubling thoughts, or why I'm so pressure-filled and how I can let that go? What does that look like? You take that and apply that to the canvas of the day, and now you're getting into the practical tools and application, because then you start formulating, wow, I developed these kind of little sayings of, you got my back today. You're for me. There's no pressure in you. You love these people more than I love them, and I love them a lot. You got this. Mm-hmm. All these little sayings I developed they were anchors to bring me back to love. And develop your own statement you keep reminding yourself of who God is in his love. And so then, now my Bible here has it divided, so it almost makes you want to close it off, but it's not. It's next sentence. Mm-hmm. If someone says, I love God, and hates his brother, he's a liar. For who does not love his brother whom he has seen? How can he love God whom he has not seen? So this is where it brings about the reference of the invisible God is wanting to work amongst visible relationships. So you can't love an invisible God and then not love a visible human being. So the deeper antidote to my fears is I need to begin stretching my relational grid. That helped me a lot when I got that, because I was like, I just have an anxiety issue and panic attacks. Can we just solve that? And when it dawned on me, this is right around when you and I met, and I realized I have to look at every interaction as an opportunity for me to work out my relational grid of how I relate to people, how I give love, how I receive love, how I fabricate myself, how I dance around and do all these things to please people, how I obsess over failures, how I think people won't like me if I do this and I do that. And it's, wow, that's like a whole charade.
Yeah, and I think everybody has that spaghetti mess in their mind.
Totally.
Everybody does. How you manifest it can look different in people, but I think we all have that stuff, and it's just revealing where we need to be made more perfected in love. And it's a journey. And even as we're discussing it, we are still in the process of what that looks to figure it out. Mm-hmm. And you have those moments where you land in them and you feel that and you sense that and you go, oh, okay, that's what that feels like. Mm-hmm. I want more of that. I want more of that.
I want more of that too.
You know.
And if this has been a help to your life in any way, take a look at the book I Will Not Fear, and tying in with that, I have a brand new book I'm so excited about because it's laid out in a very practical way, The Heart Healing Journey. Because these two books, if you take the Heart Healing Journey use it and then combine it with the theme that you're working on. So if it's rejection, use it along with the rejection mindset book. If it's learning to love yourself, God loves me, I love myself. Or you can use it in conjunction with I will not fear. These two work great together, and they'll be a great resource. But I pray that in our discussion today, we at least got you thinking. We didn't answer everything like perfectly and tie a bow around every little area. We're just our work is to, in our discussion, you'll find yourself in it. And by finding yourself in it, God will use conversation to speak to you. So if these episodes are a blessing to your life, consider a one-time donation or consider joining our partnership. If you become a monthly partner, there are cool resources and tools that are made available to you as we partner with you and you partner with us. But we really feel like God is using the power of conversations in this day of media, in this day of video and audio and podcasting and YouTube and all that. I believe God is using conversations to speak into the lives of people. So we pray that our story and our journey can be a blessing to your life. If it has been, take a moment and share it with someone that you love that can be encouraged by this. And we look forward to sharing more helpful materials with your life and your journey.
Thank you, everyone.
God bless you. We'll see you guys next time.